Welcome everyone to another edition of IAG's Trade Talk. My name is Ben Blaschke, Managing Editor of Inside Asian Gaming, and really pleased today to introduce two very special guests all the way from South Africa. Of course, we're talking Nigel Atherton, Group CEO of Peermont Hotels, Casinos and Resorts, and Billy Gray, Group Gaming Executive. Guys, thanks for joining us. Really great to talk to you.
Thanks, Ben. It's really great having us on your show.
Well, first of all, for our viewers in Asia who may not be completely familiar with the whole South African gaming scene, really, can you give us a bit of just a bit of a background of South Africa's casino industry, and particularly Piermont as well?
Yeah, so Ben, just to give a sense of it, Piermont is the third largest gaming operator in South Africa. We have properties in South Africa and Southern Africa. We have an operation in Botswana as well. And really were created back in 1995 when the whole South African casino licensing process took shape. In total, 41 licenses in the country, of which we have, like I said, we have 12 properties in total between the two places. We've also expanded into online sports betting, which is not quite online gaming yet, but as a field that we're in, which I'm sure Billy will touch on, as well as far as we talk about the kind of innovations and changes we've had over the last 12 months.
And I mean, obviously, COVID is the topic of the day. Unfortunately, it's affecting the industry around the world. How has it impacted you guys?
So COVID has been I think for the whole world, COVID has been a massive challenge. It's been absolute tragic, the loss of life, the damage to business. It's been, really unprecedented times, and I think something that nobody wants to live through again. And if anyone's following South Africa, you'll see that we're about to go into, it looks like we're in our third wave right now. Hospitals under pressure, and that side of the country really, in a difficult space. As far as business is concerned, we had in South Africa the unprecedented event of having to close our doors. We opened Empress Palace, which is our flagship property, in 1998, and since then we're 24/7 businesses. Most of your listeners' businesses are. And when we had to close on the 27th of March last year, we didn't have the front door key, which was quite amusing, I suppose, but also very sad, to see it happening. So we went through a difficult time of being closed for about 3 months. That was kind of our second quarter. Third quarter was with very severe restrictions. And I think, just for interest's sake, the South African restrictions are I think they're pretty onerous compared to a lot of places. So we have a curfew in place. We've had times where there's no alcohol sales, which we found definitely impacts gaming revenues. We've had the curfew with alcohol, and then specifically on the gaming floor, we've got an extensive social distancing policy in place where every second slot machine is turned off. We limit the number of people on gaming tables. We have screens between everybody, which if I look at other jurisdictions, seems to be quite a bit stricter than what most people are doing. I think if you look at Vegas, they've pretty much opened up. They're back to normal, but going to the comment we just had just before we started recording, the vaccine process overseas is far more aggressive than we've had here. So we're definitely in difficult times. So that's the negative. On a positive side, though, it has also spurred a lot of innovation. You put a lot of really good management and executives in their houses for 3 months and tell them to think, and a lot of really good ideas pop out. So cashless gaming is something Billy will talk on. The launch of our Piermont Winner's Circle app, which is we think the first in the world to allow this to happen, which is a key COVID innovation for us, and the fact that we've got into online sports betting, which is a big positive step for us as well.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to what we're actually here to talk about, as you say, Nigel, which is cashless gaming. Of course, you and I actually crossed paths in Japan 3 years ago, is where we met, but we've moved on to a very, very different topic now. I mean, cashless gaming in Asia is really starting to become, talked about quite widely, especially with COVID, as you say. There is talk of introducing cashless technology into Macau's casinos. And in New South Wales, actually, in Australia, there is the regulator has come to an agreement with both operators, Star and Crown, to go fully cashless in the next, I haven't given a time frame, but over the next few years. So, that's quite groundbreaking. But, as you mentioned, you're already quite well advanced on that process there at Peermont. Can you talk a bit about where you're at and what sort of technologies you've introduced there?
Let's call it coinless gaming to start off with, because We still have bill acceptors on all the machines and things like that. So to call it cashless is not 100% correct. But it has been around in South Africa and Southern Africa for going back to maybe 92, 93, when it was first introduced. And then smart card technology came around sort of end of the 90s, beginning of 2000. And I think most of the operators in this country never went the TITO route, which most of the world went. We had one of our competitors dabbled with it for a little while, and then moved on to the smart card technology. So smart card technology and coinless gaming has been around for well over 2 decades now in South Africa. And so I think the acceptance of it here is pretty much entrenched in how people operated. I think the advent of the pandemic and that just pushed it that step further, where now people no longer wanted to touch money, things like that. So we had to sort of bring in tighter controls, if you want to call it that, because you were able to play with what they called an anonymous card or a day card, which we said, okay, from a contact tracing perspective, let's, as operators, get rid of that so that we knew everybody that was coming in and playing. That's obviously had very good benefits for us in the sense that we now track 100% of our play in a land-based casino, which I think is almost unprecedented if you think about it around the world. That also then led to the fact that, you know, we need to innovate so that the person doesn't have to physically handle cash. So we said, okay, the easiest way to do that is to bring in an app. Or maybe take a step back. We use the Scientific Games software in all our properties here. So you're able to move between properties with a single card. So it doesn't matter if you're in one property and move to the next property, you have the same card, you have access to your points, you have access to your balances, things like that. So it was almost a natural progression to say, well, you know what, we can bring in technology to assist us now that the player, whether they're sitting at home, whether they walked into the casino, can fund their wallet, as it were, come in here, walk straight to the machine, put their card in and continue playing. Okay, so that was really the benefit of having, let's call it COVID, which is not a nice thing to say, a benefit, but it sort of forced the hand, as it were. And I think if you look at the banking world, ATMs were something that came in and suddenly your teller was almost obsolete. But in the beginning, you know, people didn't use the ATMs. They went into their bank because that's what they liked. This pandemic has just said, listen, you know what, you don't want to be confronted with the person in front of you. You don't want this exposure. So this has helped push that technology forward. So now basically what you're able to do is, with all the normal, I know there'll be AML questions and FIC questions and things like that. You're able to download our app, you register, we do all the AML checking, things like that. So your funds have to come from your bank account. And when you withdraw, it goes back to your bank account. It can't go back to another bank account. So we've done all those checks so that we make sure that we apply to all the AML requirements. And it's as simple as downloading the app and registering, and we do a quick, let's call it a FIC check. That's what we call it here, Financial Intelligence Act, where we check that it is your bank account. We check your identification to make sure that it is you. And then we say, okay, you're registered now. You're now able to download your funds and you can continue playing. Nigel, I don't know if you want to add to that process.
Yeah, I think, Ben, there's probably kind of a couple of key things that your listeners would want to take note of. That the first one is, as Billy correctly says, the way we've rolled out cashless in South Africa is that every customer has to sign up, provide all your marketing details, so your ability to track your customers, where they're from, and allow that data to influence marketing decisions is huge. at the same time, where our casino is, or casinos are, we have, various catchment areas. And, if revenues drop off, you can quickly see, what tier of player, what geographical location, where the problems are coming from. And that information comes through very quickly. So that's a massive benefit. The other point is that, the bulk of our casino customers, and again, this should resonate, have limited time to play. And if you think of the old traditional way of doing things is, come to the casino, go buy chips or go buy credits, walk to the slot machine, that there's a chunk of your fun time that you are spending just doing administration, for want of a better way of putting it, that you can completely, divorce from now. So that, I think there's upside that customers have more time to have fun, which is what we're all about. The other thing that Billy didn't really touch on is just the practical flow of cash within a property. So we found, going back kind of 10 years, that a lot of cash would come in, whether, physical cash coming into, initially would come to the cash desk, and you would buy tokens back in the day, and then you would sit with a lot of physical cash with all of the risk that comes with cash in South Africa specifically, which I'm sure it exists overseas as well. But the consequence was that, you were paying cash deposit fees. Ultimately, we were then funding the ATMs ourselves to try and, defer some of those costs. But we're finding that as we go more and more credit card and debit card, but also, with the app completely cashless, the consequence is that we just have a lot less cash on the property. Positive for the business because the cash is getting into the bank account quicker. And also less administration around counting cash, clearing the machines. We've reduced the frequency of our clearances. So there's a lot of operational savings and efficiencies that come through when you just don't have this messy pieces of paper that you have to chase everywhere.
So obviously across Asia, there's been, regulators have viewed the move towards cashless quite differently from one jurisdiction to another. Some regulators are quite open to the idea, some seem quite resistant. Given, as you said before, that South Africa, has a 20-year history of making, steps in this direction, has the process of working with the regulator to implement, cashless gaming, coinless gaming, has that been quite smooth?
I think, look, we've been fairly fortunate in the sense that a lot of this, let's call it coinless gaming, came pre-regulator. Okay. So when the rollout of the regulations happened and when all the new dispensation came into being, it already existed. So it had to be sort of factored into all the regulations and things like that. So that transition, I think, was a lot smoother in the sense that the regulators understood it right from the outset, as opposed to it being something that was introduced at a later stage. There's also been a lot of the sports betting side, which has moved on to the online space. So regulators have been exposed to that. And I also believe that, when they look at the processes that are in place, the regulations are actually tighter in this aspect than with cash, because it has to come from a valid bank account. The money must go to a valid bank, that same valid bank account again, held by the player. So, and they're quite happy with all the controls that the banks have in place to make sure that that person has all their AML requirements in place. So in a sense, I think it's been fairly smooth, the transition from, what the regulators would like to see and what has happened.
Sure.
But it does highlight that, if you look at kind of broad strokes, the controls over the cashless balances and the cash, I think that gives the regulator a much better line of sight. It's much less risk. I think Billy hit, all the right points from an operator. It's also, you're not having to worry about cash and the risk of robberies and that kind of thing. It's great. The one negative to pop out is that it tends to be a bit of a different world as far as our surveillance team are concerned. Historically, you could watch a camera and see a player with cash and physically follow the trail of the physical cash. Where at the moment we're finding that our IT controls are much more important. You want to make sure that people can't hack into your database and those kind of things that were probably less of an issue historically. Well, always an issue for player personal details, but as far as the risk of physical cash going missing, you were kind of ring fenced within the property. And what a smart solution does, or a cashless solution does, is it opens up that cash to the whole world. from a risk point of view. So there's definitely a higher risk there. And it does highlight that I think the surveillance and the exceptions team specifically have to evolve their practices and start thinking differently about the risks.
No doubt you've also spoken to many of your customers about the move towards cashless and gotten their opinions and thoughts and experiences. What's been the feedback so far?
So we've had some really, really good feedback. We have players from our competitors coming in and say they sit at the competitor's property and say, you know what, I can sit here and I can do this at Piermont. What's wrong with you guys? We like the convenience. I think from a player perspective, the beauty of it is they can sit down, they can participate in their favorite machine, they can get up, they can then walk to the restaurant, they can order their meal, they can pay their meal from their card, they can then go to the hotel, they can check in, and it's one card. They can then get up from there, go to the next property, and just carry on. It is very, very convenient for them. It takes away all those. I think if you go back in history, it's almost like the different denominations when you had little coins and tokens. In order to move from one machine to another, you may have to visit the cash desk in between because it was a different denomination. All that unnecessary hassle has been taken away, and it's become a far more seamless operation. So it's very convenient for our customers. From our perspective, the beauty about it is we start to get a complete picture of our players on Complex. We can see what they do, when they do it, how often they do it, and we can start marketing to them and offering them the service that they require. If they like a specific restaurant, we can add in specials for them there. If they like to stay over or they don't like to stay over, it gives us that insight, which is always exceptionally interesting for us.
So given those experiences,
I think the only negative that sometimes comes through is that typically casino customers are slightly older, and as a consequence, there are, and I don't know if it's international, but in South Africa, sometimes the quality of the cell phones and mobiles is not as up to date as the youngsters have, and there are sometimes some trust issues. Some of the customers are very, and I think you'd appreciate, very superstitious. They like to feed the cash in the slot machine itself. So there's some of those things that come through as negative feedback, but Billy, I think you'd agree it's less and less and less as we continue.
So I mean, obviously, guys, but we've got, I'm sure there are regulators watching this, and certainly there'll be operators watching this, and some of them will be, toying with that whole idea around, do we go cashless? When do we go? How do we go? I mean, what would your advice be to those people watching that are involved in the space and thinking about it?
Oh, do you want to answer that one?
No, you go.
Okay. Look, it's like anything. It's the inevitable. Okay, it's going to go that way. I think as a regulator or as somebody operation, you need to make sure that your customers have the best convenience. Okay, as a regulator, you need to make sure that your controls are in place, and I think it satisfies both, in the sense that your controls actually are now tighter because you have a complete sight of what's happening. Okay, and from an operator's perspective, it has massive benefits in being able to market better to the person, to be able to service your customer better. Okay. And I think from a customer's perspective, it's far better in the sense that you don't have to carry cash around with you. Okay, you don't have to worry about the fact that you don't have funds on you. It's on the card, and the control of it, to a large extent, moves into your hands.
And in a sentence, Billy, if I was in a competitive market and nobody else had smart or cashless, I would say push for first mover advantage. Get it first. You're going cashless doesn't mean you throw away cash. It just means you offer this as an alternate solution that customers migrate to. And I think you'll quickly see it as a competitive difference.
Nigel, that leads me. Sorry, Billy.
Sorry, Ben. The one thing we can add to that is that I know a lot of people are concerned about the cost of smart card. Okay, we operate this with a mag stripe solution, so that cost doesn't exist for us.
Sure. So, I mean, the last question for you guys is looking ahead a little bit to the future. Obviously, particularly at Peermont there, you've got to this point in the advancement of technology in coinless, moving towards cashless. What does the future hold in this segment?
Look, I think the kind of the bigger picture that Piermont has, or the vision we have with our current cashless solution as a one-stop shop for our customers. I mean, Billy's alluded already that, you know, once you've got your cashless card, we want to be in a position that between the app, the card, being on property or being online, that it's one wallet, you know, one access to funds that you can use anywhere you want to. You can use it to purchase meals, the hotel, use it for casino gaming, and that it's just an integrated kind of closed loop system, which will give our customers absolute convenience wherever they go. And that's something we're moving to very quickly. Billy and his team are pushing it very hard. And I do think it'll continue to give us competitive advantage in the South African market.
Sure. So, you know, if our player is concerned about where we would like to get, if our player was concerned about the risks around COVID and wants to play at home, we would ideally like to have our online gaming approved. That way they could play their favorite game at home. And if they then do feel comfortable to come out, they have the opportunity of coming into our land-based property, walking up to their same favorite machine and continue playing. And it should be seamless.